Today on the podcast, you'll hear my interview with Radhika Vekaria, a Grammy-nominated, award-winning multi-instrumentalist and sensory artist. I love this podcast and the people I get to speak to on it. Radhika Vekaria is a poet in sound. Just the sound of her voice, the words she uses, the way she describes her response to the natural world around her, and the way she describes creating the music and the work that she creates is beautiful. And I found her mesmerizing. And I find it so fascinating that a person can create an entire performing and recording career by building from the sounds you hear in your own head. This was a wonderful conversation. I think you will enjoy this as well. Radhika Vekaria, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to speak with you, to talk about your career, to talk about your newest album, your Grammy-nominated new album. But can we start out by just letting you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell a little bit of the story that brings us to where we are right now in your career?
Oh my goodness, I don't think we have that long. It's been a long roundabout scenic route to this situation. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to heal people when I was very little. And long story short, I guess life said I would support people through music and sound. And so the music that I make now, people find it very supportive for them mentally, even sometimes physically. I fuse Eastern and Western music. So I grew up in an Indian household in Britain where I had the best of both cultures. So I grew up listening to studying classical music. I played piano since I was 6 years old, played violin for a few years. So I fell in love with classical music, but I also had this background of loving things from the East and my depths of my own heritage and culture as well, which was Indian music and spirituality as well. So it's just culminated through life egging me on to a convergence point. So that's the music that I make.
Oh, that's beautiful. I was looking at the bio that you submitted, which our listeners will already have heard at this point. And the very first line, Radhika Vekaria is a Grammy-nominated, award-winning multi-instrumentalist and sensory artist. And I'm like, sensory artist? What could it mean? I know what those words mean. How do you think about this? What does this mean to you?
I think for me it was less thinking about it and realizing what it is. So I think we make music because it's something that needs to be expressed through us, right? Well, we can't really determine the impact it's going to have. Like I didn't know that the music that I was going to end up making was going to feel healing for people. It's just something that I naturally went to and then realized, oh, well, this is what I wanted to do as a child. So I think that what I've realized is that it's a multi-sensory experience for people because the language that I use a lot in my music is Sanskrit. And Sanskrit really has this incredible, profound potency to impact the human nervous system. It works with your cells and on kind of the mechanism of vibration. So that is going to have a kind of an intense and beautiful effect on the nervous system. So your senses are going to be activated internally, externally, your mind, your emotions, your physical nervous system. And people have different experiences when they hear this music. I mean, yeah, I've had people write to me and tell me the um, circumstances in their lives and how it's shifted after hearing this music. I mean, what more can you ask for with your music, right? So I can't determine what's going to happen, but I do get. It's almost like you kind of involuntarily get into this experiment called music and you don't realize that it's an experiment that's happening. You don't realize the results. You don't know what the results are going to be or what conclusion you're going to end up at, but it's really fun. And if people are smiling along the way, then that's a good thing.
Beautiful. So I'm hearing you talk about the language itself, the Sanskrit language, and how impactful that the sound of that language is for people. Can you say more about that? Like, I feel like there's a real like dumb question kind of bubbling to the top of my mind here, which is like I feel like I'm aware of Sanskrit as sort of a sacred language, but maybe not a living language.
Yeah.
And like, can you please tell me more?
Yes. So Sanskrit is from India. It was actually realized or developed in India. And the ancient sages and seers, when we didn't have all of this to interfere with our amazing capacities as human beings to realize things and commune with nature, we used to contemplate and sit under the stars and be just there was a non-obstruction of life, happening, and so the very enlightened ones would commune and realize this language, and the whole mechanism of Sanskrit is that, look, if we believe that we are vibrating energy, right, our cells vibrate with an energy. I think we're all coming to this acceptance of saying that we are all made of energy. We vibrate at a certain frequency. Our cells vibrate at a certain frequency. When we vibrate at a high frequency, we're expansive, we're healthy, we're vital, our brain function is good. We live a more fulfilled and complete life because we're able to follow the path of our internal truth, right? When we're at a lower vibration, we're not able to function fully, right? We don't understand the purpose of our soul. This language, it's a vibratory language. So what happens with Sanskrit is, as opposed to modern day languages, say I say the word sky. Okay, if you say the word sky, the akash is the word for ether or space. If you say the word space or sky, do you feel like the space or sky?
No, I have an image in
Does
my
it?
head of space or sky,
Right.
but it's not like a sensory experience.
Right. So even if you said space, 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 you can get the idea of the word, but the word itself doesn't necessarily carry the qualities of space. Whereas if you say akash, 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 you immediately feel it. I can see a little glimmer of a smile on your face. There's a feeling when you utter this word, and the way that it hits your vocal cords, the nerve centers that get stimulated, the qualities of the word that you're saying, something in your system begins to recognize and resonate with it. And when you resonate with something, you become that something. You
Hmm.
don't just know it's something, you actually feel what it's like to be that something. Sanskrit is like that. So the more you say these words and you imbibe these words, your system begins to resonate on the same frequency and begins to bring forth the qualities of those words within you. It's a
Mm.
it's a becoming language. You become that which you speak. So when you say rightly that it's sacred, it is sacred because we should be making sounds that we resonate with to bring forth qualities that are beautiful, excellent, expansive, lead us to something higher in ourselves, and to understand the world around us, to understand the nature of all things, the truth of all things, including the nature of ourselves.
I mean, this is so like just the way you are using the English language right now is so beautiful and so powerful. Um, and like it's so clear that you are an artist who is so gifted at this level of communication. Can I like step back again into the story, because I'm always so interested in process and in craft. Like how do you move from being a 6-year-old learning classical piano to being a grown up with this level of command of the poetry of language?
Well, I love great speakers, and I come from England, so I think our love for poetry and classical music and um, arts that are fine is pretty prevalent. Like even in our commercials growing up, we would have classical music and great orators speaking. So I can't take credit for that all myself. It's what you're surrounded by
Mhm.
and what you're influenced by. But I also, I think music isn't everything. And I think I have always been a musical person. Like when I was a child, I was actually singing before I could speak. So my parents loved music. We had music all the time in the home. And I was singing perfect melodies before I could utter the words. So the musicality of expression was always there for me. It was always there for me. So I think it's just infused into everything I do. And with classical music, my brother played the piano. So obviously I wanted to play the piano.
Mhm.
And I think learning an instrument from a very young age, it really becomes a foundational training for the way that you express yourself and see the world. Not only how you express, but how music is in everything. I mean, in Indian music, my teachers will, my teacher is so amazing, Meher Palekar. He'll sit there and say things like, when a bird comes and sits on a branch, and that weight of the bird on the branch makes the branch bounce. Think of your voice moving like that when you're doing a vocal practice. You visualize nature as you're doing a vocal practice, as you're playing an instrument. Any melody, any rhythm, any sound, any tone, anything to do with music is evident in nature around you, in the natural world, right? So I always had this fascination as a child. I would look at nature, and I'm going to be very frank with you. My parents would have conversations about religion and science and all these things. And from a very young age, I would say nature is my God. Like I would say that as a kid. I didn't know.
Mhm.
And so I think that reverence for something greater than ourselves was always there as a child. I wasn't enamored by the twinkly things and the sparkly things and the toys and all this kind of stuff. But I think it's just a combination of the influences around you. And my family, again, as I said, was very musical. My father loved music, and so it was, for me, it's as old as oxygen.
Yeah.
It's as
Yeah.
old as oxygen. So I think that's where the melody, and if I have any poetry in the way that I speak, it's just, that's what you're taking in, you're breathing that in. You become what you breathe in, right? It's like you are what you eat.
Yeah.
I think you become what you breathe.
And to have really been tuned in from such an early age to both the musicality around you and the natural world. Like, I really resonated with your visual metaphor of the bird on the branch. Like, I can imagine, I use these kinds of visual metaphors all the time in my own teaching for, oboists. And, I resonate with that tremendously. So, I mean,
Present.
this is beautiful to hear. Will you talk about your new album and what from whence did it come, and what has this project been for you?
You mean Warriors of Light? Do
I
you mean that one?
do. Yeah.
Yes. So Warriors of Light was a 4-year process. It took 4 years to make, and it started around 2021. And this one was very personal for me. In the album, there's an arc, there's a journey. You start with a very ancient mantra, and I decided to start the album with that. I made the album in a very jumbled up way. I started with the third song, and then wrote the second song, and then ended up writing the seventh song, and then writing so it wasn't a chronological thing. It was just born from my experience. I actually didn't know that it was going to be called Warriors of Light. I didn't have a concept in mind. I just made music that was expressing something, and the world was, shut down at that time, and we were going through something really hard. And I felt this pulse of this fire and resilience arise because of what I was seeing in the world and also what I was going through personally. It was a kind of a mirrored experience, my own individual experience, and then witnessing what was happening for so many people around the world at that time. And something stepped forward at that time. And I think the theme that arose was this warrior principle. So all of the pieces in this album are connected to a manifestation of the divine. And, I think music, vibration is an expression of the divine force, the nature of things. And there's these different iterations and different incarnations of them. And I had experiences, during, I think the pandemic allowed some of us to go very deep,
Mm-hmm.
very, very deep. And it's strange in a time of difficulty, how you choose to spend your time and where it can take you. Like there were so many people during that period who made their best music during that time because they had nothing else to do. And so it was a space where I could go deeper, and these songs expressed themselves. They came forward, but I didn't know what picture it was painting. It's almost like you wake up one day and you say, you know what, I'm really feeling the color yellow, or I'm really feeling the the texture of this paint today. I want to paint with this color, and I want to use this texture, and I want to use this brush. And you add a little bit to the painting, and then a little while later you pick something else, you're in a different mood. And then after about kind of 2.5 years, I stepped back from that painting and went, oh, this looks like a bit of a theme here that's happening. That is a culmination of all the strokes that I'd made and the colors that I chose. And I'm like, oh, there's a warrior theme going on here. There's a power and a determination in this album.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, there's a journey to be pieced together here. And so that's how it became. I don't think we make music. I think music makes us.
I love this story of starting from like the brush stroke, starting from what feels right today. What am I creating in my studio? I assume like a home studio because we were all so isolated at that time. And only gradually as the album builds itself out are you able to like sit back and see the theme from it. And I think I've heard writers speak of the same thing. Like I sit down and I write my morning pages, or I write a little tiny piece, or I do a little timed work, and then a year goes by and I discover that I've got all of this writing, and it turns out that it actually holds together, that it actually creates something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And so many of the people that I have spoken to on this podcast talk about the pandemic as such a time of deep work and deep discovery. So all of this so resonant. This wasn't your first album though. Am I Yeah, what I guess I wonder, how has it felt different to you, and how has the evolution how has that career evolution been
Yeah,
for you?
yeah, it's a really good question. So my previous album was called Sapta the Seven Ways, and it was much more meditative. And that came about around 2018, and it got released in 2020. So it was really interesting because I think what happens for some of us is we think we're creating just because we're expressing, but I think if some of us are in tune to maybe what may be needed in the future. And it was interesting because when the pandemic came, I had so many messages from people that said, how did you know to have made Sapta for this? And I was simply making it was my first foray into music that was combining these Sanskrit, philosophies and languages, and these Vedic stories and these Vedic arcs into music. Because honestly, I had been asked for a very long time to do this. I had been asked for about 8 years. People would hear me sing in a personal, more devoted way, and they would say, "Why haven't you recorded any of yourself singing this music?" And I said, "Because it's so personal. It's actually a spiritual practice. It's so intimate that I wasn't going to come out and share it with the world. I didn't think of doing that. I didn't think anybody would be interested, to be honest. Who's going to listen to Sanskrit? Who's going to enjoy that? Um, except for, I didn't know that it was going to be a thing. I didn't know I could have a career based on it. It was more a personal spiritual thing, and I did it. And, but that was much more meditative. Um, it was a very different feeling album.
Mm-hmm.
And then Warriors of Light came because of personal experience. It came also as an experimentation because Sabda was all in Sanskrit. Warriors of Light is in English, Tamil, and Awadhi, and Sanskrit. Tamil and Awadhi are two other languages from India. And I wanted to sing in English on this album because I wanted to create a bridge and also fuse my cultural upbringing is British and Indian. I wanted to express more of my personal journey and who I am in the music. I'm multicultural.
Yeah.
And so why pick one thing? And even in the music, there's djembe, there's African percussions because my parents are born in Africa.
Hmm.
So I grew up listening to African music and having a little bit of that culture. So Warriors of Light is it has a lot more of my personal journey and upbringing in it. It also has my message. It has a spoken word piece in it,
Mm.
which was a big deal for me because I grew up with a speech impediment,
No.
big speech impediment. Yes, I still have it at times now. And the Sanskrit and these languages and really being supported by the music that I've been making. It's very interesting. It's like we think that we're just expressing music, but we don't realize that the music that we're making, there's this feedback loop and it is supporting us. It's like a cheerleader or a coach for our better self. And so for me, making this music, every time I speak about it, my speech impediment falls away. When I'm stressed in life, my speech impediment comes back.
Huh.
So to do an album where I'm doing a spoken word called Warriors of Light, the call in the middle of it was a huge deal for me. There was a time where I would never have imagined doing this. There's
Amazing.
no way.
And
So,
and yet from the very moment we got on, I've been so struck by the musicality in your voice and by the effortless way you seem to express yourself. So fascinating. Can
mhm,
I jump back to something you said? You said that it hadn't occurred to you to record these kinds of songs because they were so personal, so intimate, and it never occurred to you that you could make a career sharing this kind of like almost self-healing
mhm,
vocalizing. And uh, I'm so struck because as a because musicians are performers. Like we know what it is to be on the stage, to be sharing, to be connected with an audience. And that's not what you're describing as the genesis of this first album at
no.
all. And were you a performer before this, or like you
Yes,
have been? Please,
yes.
like, let's talk about this bit.
I've performed a lot. So basically, I was going to be a surgeon. And then my father did the most un-Indian thing a father can do. He made me question being a surgeon, question being a doctor. And I'm like, you've lied to me. You told me we were Indian. This is weird. For any Asian family to discourage their daughter from being a doctor. But he said, you love doing so many things. You love traveling. You love music. You love all these things. I don't think he expected that I would go into music, but basically I got my degree in mathematics and economics just to have a degree. And I was very good at mathematics and everybody was doing it at that time. I got my degree, but I basically from college I was singing the whole time. I was doing
Yeah.
talent shows and all this kind of stuff. And in college, I didn't like my degree. And my mom reminded me actually a few years ago, you came to us after your first year and said you wanted to go to the Royal Academy of Music. And we said no. and I remember saying to her, you shouldn't have told me that. I totally forgot. But basically, I finished my degree and started to go to singer-songwriter nights, underground venues, singing. So I would work in the day in the
Mhm.
city. at a job, wake up at like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, go work in town, and then go back to the suburbs of London, have dinner, pick up my parents' car, and drive back into central London at 10 p.m. at night and wait my turn to sing. I would sing a lot of jazz and blues and soul because I grew up with so many different varieties of music. I always loved classical music. The Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2 is like burned into my brain. Like but I also, I was playing Chopin and playing classical music, but I also imbibed like jazz and soul and R&B and world influenced music and then Indian music from my parents. And so I had this just, I was just doused in it. And then I would sing it live a lot. I got my chops, if you're going to say chops, I got my chops going and throwing myself into situations and being up in front of people that I didn't know and just waiting my turn to go and sing and learn stage presence and learn performance. Then I ended up singing backing vocals for artists. I ended up playing at festivals. I was doing the singer-songwriter thing. I was writing songs in English. I have gone the whole gamut
Yeah.
of training while being thrown in the deep end. I worked with producers. I made this kind of music, that kind of music. But the thing that happened, Jennet, is that at that time, for many years, I was making music that I thought I was supposed to make.
Yeah.
And I wasn't getting anywhere with my own music. And when I came to America, I ended up in a show in Germany. I was called for this random audition by a jazz pianist that I knew that I used to do jazz events with. And I inadvertently auditioned for a show in Germany that was Indian culture meets Cirque du Soleil. Okay. It was called India. And I ended up 3 weeks later, not having known what I was auditioning for, going and for this show because the American director for Annie, the Broadway musical, was the musical director, and Keith Levinston. And he said, I sang some jazz, and he said, can you sing some Indian stuff? And I went, I've never sung Indian things outside of the home, and I did. And he said, okay. And 3 weeks later, I was in Germany. And that was the turning point because I was singing 8 to 10 shows a week, singing in
Sure.
Carnatic language. It was Sting, Peter Gabriel, like an A.R. Rahman, all of this repertoire, like Indian A.R. Rahman and Sting and Peter Gabriel, all these people. And I was singing this smorgasbord of incredible music that was Western and Eastern. And that's when something went in my internal system. I felt so alive, so happy. It was the highest point of my life. And that was the pivot point. And after that show finished, the Americans, because Americans are so wonderfully convincing, they said, you need to come to America. So I started to come back and forth to America for 2 years. And when I came to this country, there was something that felt so possible. Like every time I came here, I felt like I could experiment musically. I felt like I was received with an enthusiasm. The word no is not very prevalent here, especially in creative communities. It's always, yeah, let's try it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Yes,
And
and.
I love it. I mean, it's a relatively new country compared to the rest of the world. I think it still has this can do, let's explore the possibilities attitude. And that is something I have never taken for granted here. And I've been here and it has cultivated something in me. And then being in California, being here and having the time and the space to reawaken that which I loved as a child, which was Vedic spirituality and learning, shastras and mantras and all these things that I loved as a child.
Yeah.
And life distracted, and life took me on this scenic route. Like, look at this, do this. Why don't you try this? Why don't as a child what you are going to love in this life? It. And I was fortunate at a relatively young age to be reminded of it and be led back to it. And if you'd have asked me, sorry, it's a very long-winded explanation, but if you'd have asked me, even 10 years ago, when I even came here, that I would be making music that is to do with Vedic culture and then explore contemporary soundscapes and be talking about these philosophies from the Vedas and singing vibration and mantras and English infusing this, I wouldn't have believed you, because you don't know what is possible. You don't know what this life is going to open up for you. You have no idea. And before, I was going upon the stories and the templates of what had already been done. When you meet people in the industry in general, we all think we know all of the paths that have been carved, right? We see people who've done it before and we think, that's how they did it. Well, that's how this person did it. I'm going to do it like that, or I'm going to use this strategy. You are negating. That is an infinitesimal possibility. That is so small. It's like a grain of sand on a beach.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we've touched. Those are all the possibilities that have been realized. The grain of sand on a beach. There are so many possibilities and more combinations of what life is going to look like and what you can do as a unique individual, what your unique expression is. The combination that I'm doing had to be me, because that's my lived experience. It's everything that I've imbibed as a child. It's even past life. It doesn't make sense that I can pick up mantras and vibration like this so quickly. It actually doesn't make sense, because I didn't grow up in a family that was deeply religious. But there's the natural gift that all of us have. Then there's the environment laid on top of that. And then there is just infinite possibility and circumstance and karma.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what that equation is going to lead to. So I always say to people, there's a point that I got to a few years ago where, you're hammering through this industry and you're going, nothing's working. Like, why? Everyone's telling you great, why? And I remember somebody said to me the most important thing I have ever heard in my life. And I just say this with so much love to your listeners. They said, don't focus on what it looks like. Focus on what it's going to feel like. That changed everything for me. Because what we've seen transpire in the world, again, is a grain of sand.
Yeah.
So lead with the feeling. Lead with the feeling. Forget what it's going to look like.
The feeling in your body, the feeling that you can engender for the listener, the feeling that is created when you create an experience.
Yes. What do you feel? Like lead with that. What is it that you want to experience? Not what you want it to look like to the outside world. I didn't think about that at all. And I had a nomination early. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think about, I want to make an album to have that happen.
Right.
I didn't. I did it because I was led by a feeling.
Yes. One brush stroke at a time. Today I want to paint in yellow.
Exactly. So everything in my life now, every decision I make, even down to what I eat, and I love chocolate too much, but I'm saying that it's the feeling, even who you choose to be around. How do I want to feel? Because what happens is when you start choosing the feeling that you want to experience in this world, your choices become much more refined. They become excellent for you.
Yes.
And then in turn, they will become excellent for your expression and excellent for others.
Yes. Radhika, you are saying all of the things. All of the things. This has been such an inspiring arc. Thank you for this conversation. When we started and when you told like a very direct and linear story of how we got from your childhood and your influences to the album that we are in, that made sense. And then when you told this like astoundingly expansive story of, okay, well, this was the work that went into it, and this was the kind of thing, and this was the kind of thing, and then I stumbled and fell into a production in Germany, uh and it all came back around to creating the work that feels good
Hmm.
is like creating your success, is creating the magic that is you. And I just love this conversation. I thank you so much for
Oh,
being here. Where do you want people to look for you or follow you?
yeah, so you can find me on my first and last name, radhikavekaria.com. You can find me on Instagram at radhikavekaria_. So, find me, say hello. And on my website, if you go there, a pop-up will come up. You can join my newsletter. I make experiences like when I perform live. I create, we co-create an experience together.
Mm.
So, sometimes the audience will sing. I'll actually get you singing and saying these sounds. It's been very, very profound and powerful. So you can find out about events and workshops. I also have another album that has been created with the Vienna Synchron Orchestra called Sacred Echoes as well. So that just came out with a collaborative of mine, Natalie Bonin, who's a beautiful violinist. And that was an East-West culmination. So you'll see that music out there as well. But our album Warriors of Light was nominated for a Grammy last year. And so you'll hear an evolution and expansion through my music of starting with something meditative, then expressing more of myself, and now going to this culmination of the East and the West, the orchestral and the devotional and the sacred. I'm just so grateful that people would be willing to witness the journey, but mostly not just witness the journey, because it's really not about me. It's really not about me. It's about just when you follow your feeling, you'll become who you are. And your only job in this life is to be truly who you are. That's it.
Mm.
That is the most important job from when you're born. And you do it from when you're born. And everything else is a distraction. Even industry, this, that, everything is a distraction. So, what I hope people will get from listening to the journey of the music is just this, hopefully an expression of courage and resilience and peace and truth for me to have led to that path, and hopefully it will inspire other people to do that same thing.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.